Who's there?
It's me, 99. Let me in.
I'm sorry, 99, but I can't let you in until you prove to me that it is really you.
Come on, Max, it's really me.
From a parrot with a nervous breakdown to a cone that never worked and a shoe phone that predicted the future, the 1960s spy spoof Get Smart hid more bizarre secrets than Maxwell Smart ever could. Behind the bumbling antics of Agent 86 lay peculiar casting decisions, unexpected inspirations, and production mishaps that would make even KAOS scratch their heads in confusion. Here are 15 weird facts you didn't know about Get Smart. Fact 1. Don Adams stole his voice from the Thin Man. One of the most recognizable elements of Get Smart was Maxwell Smart's unique voice, that distinctive, nasal, clipped delivery that made every line memorable. But what fans might not know is that Don Adams didn't create that voice for the show at all. The iconic Maxwell Smart voice was actually borrowed from classic Hollywood, specifically from actor William Powell's portrayal of Detective Nick Charles in the Thin Man film series from the 1930s and 40s. Adams has openly admitted that he developed his signature vocal style by listening to Powell repeatedly call out to his wire-haired fox terrier in those films, shouting "Asta, Asta" in that particular staccato manner. What makes this even more interesting is that Adams had been using this exaggerated William Powell impression for years before Get Smart ever existed, incorporating it into his stand-up comedy routines where he would use the exact same voice for different character sketches, including a baseball umpire, a football coach, and a defense attorney. When the opportunity came to play Maxwell Smart, Adams simply dusted off this reliable comedic voice that had been getting laughs and oars on the nightclub circuit for over a decade. The voice became so synonymous with the bumbling secret agent that it's hard to imagine anyone else delivering classic catchphrases like "Would you believe?" or "Missed it by that much" in any other way. Barbara Feldon, who played Agent 99, later remarked that part of the reason Maxwell Smart became so popular and easy for audiences to imitate was because Don Adams did such an extreme portrayal of the character, and that extreme quality all started with his inspired decision to borrow from William Powell's sophisticated detective and turn it into comedy gold. Fact 2. The cone of silence was used to sell the show. The cone of silence became one of Get Smart's most beloved running gags, a supposedly secure communication device that never actually worked properly. But what most people don't realize is that this single scene was responsible for selling the entire show to network executives. When creators Mel Brooks and Buck Henry were trying to Get Smart picked up by NBC in 1965, they made an unusual production decision by filming the Cone of Silence sequence from the pilot episode before shooting anything else from the show. This wasn't just any random scene, it was the perfect encapsulation of everything Get Smart would become, showing Maxwell Smart insisting on using this elaborate security device to have a private conversation with the chief, only to discover that the transparent plastic domes made it impossible for those inside to hear each other while everyone outside could hear them perfectly. The producers and creators knew they had something special with this particular gag, and they were right to bet everything on it, because when they showed this scene to NBC executives, it immediately demonstrated the show's unique brand of spy spoof humor. The network brass could instantly understand what the series would be about just from watching Maxwell Smart and the chief shouting at each other under those malfunctioning plastic hemispheres while trying to discuss top-secret information. Executive producer Leonard Stern later confirmed that this scene was specifically designed and directed to serve as the main selling point for the series, and it worked so well that NBC greenlit the show based largely on the strength of that one comedic concept. The Cone of Silence went on to appear in nearly every episode throughout the series' run, becoming such an iconic piece of television history that it's still referenced in pop culture today. Fact 3. Adams changed his name to go first in auditions. Before Don Adams became a household name as Maxwell Smart, he was born Donald James Yarmy in Manhattan, New York, on April 13, 1923, and his original surname created a very practical problem in his early career as a struggling performer. In the world of show business during the 1940s and 50s, casting directors and talent scouts typically called performers for auditions in alphabetical order, which meant that anyone with a last name starting with Y would be stuck waiting until the very end of each audition day. After spending years sitting around for hours only to audition when directors were tired and had already seen dozens of other hopefuls, Adams decided he needed a change that would give him a competitive edge. The solution came through his personal life when he married Adelaide Constance Ephantis in 1947, a nightclub singer who performed professionally under the stage name Adelaide Adams. Rather than just taking inspiration from his wife's stage name, Don made the strategic decision to adopt it completely as his own professional identity, transforming himself from Donald Yarmy to Don Adams overnight. This simple change meant he would now be called up near the beginning of audition sessions instead of at the end, giving him a much better chance to perform when casting directors were still fresh and attentive. Adams himself later admitted that he specifically chose this name change because he was tired of always being called last, and while some reports suggested he claimed auditions went in alphabetical order, the reality was even simpler. He just wanted to be closer to the front of the line. This practical decision to become Don Adams ultimately worked out perfectly, as the name would eventually become synonymous with one of television's most beloved characters. Fact 4. Barbara Feldon almost got fired over deodorant. Barbara Feldon's casting as Agent 99 almost came to an abrupt end just 2 weeks into filming Get Smart, and the reason had nothing to do with her acting ability, but everything to do with corporate competition and sponsor conflicts. The show's primary sponsor was a deodorant soap company, and during the second week of production, the sponsor's CEO discovered that Feldon had appeared in a commercial for Revlon approximately 6 months earlier, promoting a roll-on deodorant product that directly competed with their own brand. The executive was furious about this conflict and became convinced that Feldon's presence on Get Smart would remind viewers of the Revlon commercial every time she appeared on screen, essentially providing free advertising for their competitor. According to Feldon's own account in her memoir, one of the show's producers pulled her aside and delivered the devastating news that the sponsor was demanding her immediate termination from the series. In a desperate attempt to save her role, Feldon made a phone call directly to the executive to plead her case and ask him to reconsider his decision, but the conversation didn't go well, and the executive actually hung up on her. After that disastrous phone call, Feldon was left waiting in what she described as absolute terror, expecting network representatives to show up at any moment to remove her from the production. However, for reasons that were never fully explained to her, the network executives never came, and she was allowed to continue in the role that would define her career. Feldon later admitted she never understood why the sponsor's demand was ultimately ignored, but she remained grateful that someone at the network had the sense to keep her on the show despite the deodorant drama. Fact 5. Control and KAOS stand for nothing. Throughout Get Smart's entire 5-season run, fans assumed that the rival spy organizations Control and KAOS were clever acronyms that stood for something meaningful, just like real-world agencies such as NASA or FBI. But the truth is that creators Mel Brooks and Buck Henry never actually came up with anything for either name to represent. The names were deliberately written in all capital letters to give the impression that they were official government and terrorist organization acronyms, which added to the show's parody of real spy agencies and the serious espionage dramas that were popular during the Cold War era of the 1960s. Control was supposed to be the good guys, a secret United States government counterintelligence agency based in Washington, D.C., where Maxwell Smart and Agent 99 worked to protect America from threats. While KAOS was described as the international organization of evil that constantly plotted world domination and chaos, the capitalized styling made both organizations feel more official and bureaucratic, perfectly fitting the show's satirical take on the spy genre. But Brooks and Henry simply never bothered to assign any actual words to those letters. This became such a well-known piece of trivia among Get Smart enthusiasts that it's been documented in numerous interviews and retrospectives about the series, with both creators openly admitting they just liked how the names sounded and looked without feeling the need to make them stand for anything specific. The joke works on multiple levels because control is meant to represent order and structure, while chaos obviously suggests chaos and disorder. So the names themselves were already doing all the work they needed to do without requiring elaborate acronyms to explain their meaning to audiences. Fact 6. Don Adams shot a parrot and gave it a breakdown. One of the strangest incidents to occur during the filming of Get Smart involved Don Adams, a prop gun, and an unsuspecting parrot that was being used as part of a scene. And according to Barbara Feldon's memoir titled Getting Smarter, the aftermath was both unexpected and somewhat traumatic for the bird involved. During what should have been a routine filming day, Adams was required to use a fake gun as part of the scene's action, which was completely normal for a spy show where weapons were frequently part of the comedy and plot. However, what nobody anticipated was how the parrot would react when Adams pointed the prop weapon in its general direction and pulled the trigger, even though the gun was obviously designed to be harmless and was only meant to fire blanks or make noise for the camera. The loud sound and sudden action apparently terrified the parrot to such a degree that the bird experienced what Feldon described as a genuine nervous breakdown, becoming so distressed and agitated that it could no longer function normally on set. Feldon mentioned this incident in her book when discussing behind-the-scenes stories from the show's production, noting that while there were many interesting tales from filming, most of them weren't particularly scandalous unless you counted Don Adams inadvertently shooting a parrot with a fake gun and causing it to have a psychological crisis. The story has become one of those quirky pieces of Get Smart lore that illustrates just how unpredictable filming a television show can be, especially when live animals are involved and when prop weapons are being fired, even if they're not actually dangerous to humans or birds in any physical sense. Fact 7. The pilot was the only black and white episode. When Get Smart premiered on NBC on September 18, 1965, viewers who tuned in to watch the first episode titled Mr. Big saw something they would never see again in the series. A completely black and white episode that stood in stark contrast to every single episode that would follow. The pilot was filmed entirely without color in early 1965, which made it a unique piece of the show's history, considering that all 137 remaining episodes were shot in full color from the second episode onward. The exact reasons why the production team decided to film the pilot in black and white have never been definitively explained, though television historians have noted that it was relatively common practice during that transitional period in television to shoot pilot episodes in black and white due to lower initial budgets and the fact that color television technology was still becoming standardized across the industry. At the time Get Smart was being developed, many networks and production companies were caught between the old world of black and white broadcasting and the emerging world of color television, so it made financial sense to save money on the pilot until the show was officially picked up for a full season. Once NBC committed to the series and it was clear that Get Smart would be a regular program, the decision was made to switch to color filming for all subsequent episodes, which meant that anyone watching the show in its original broadcast run would have experienced a dramatic visual shift between the first episode and the second. This makes the pilot episode a fascinating artifact for fans and collectors, as it represents the only chance to see Maxwell Smart, Agent 99, and the Chief in black and white. Fact 8. Agent 99 was almost Agent 100. For decades, Get Smart fans have shared a persistent rumor that Barbara Feldon's character was originally supposed to be called Agent 69, but that NBC censors deemed the number too sexually suggestive and forced the creators to change it to Agent 99. However, Barbara Feldon herself has directly addressed this myth and revealed that it's completely false, explaining that the real story behind her character's number is much simpler and far less scandalous than the popular legend suggests. According to Feldon, the original plan was actually to name her character Agent 100, and the reasoning behind this choice was straightforward and complimentary. She was supposed to be 100% perfect at her job, representing the ideal secret agent who was competent, capable, and completely reliable in every situation. This would have made sense given that Agent 99 was portrayed throughout the series as the more skilled and professional operative compared to the bumbling Maxwell Smart, so calling her Agent 100 would have emphasized her excellence and superiority. However, co-creator Buck Henry ultimately decided to change the number from 100 to 99 before filming began, and his reasoning was based purely on how the number sounded when spoken aloud rather than any concerns about censorship or inappropriate content. Henry felt that 99 simply sounded more feminine and had a better rhythm to it than 100, which came across as too formal and rigid for the character they were developing. The decision turned out to be the right one, as Agent 99 became one of the most iconic character names in television history. And the number itself became inseparable from Barbara Feldon's portrayal of the smart, sophisticated, and capable secret agent. Fact 9. Edward Platt was a trained opera singer. Edward Platt, who played the long-suffering chief on Get Smart and delivered his lines with that distinctive, deep, authoritative voice, had a background that would surprise most fans of the show because he didn't start his performing career as an actor at all, but rather as a classically trained opera singer. Before Platt ever appeared on television or in films, he attended the prestigious Juilliard School in New York City, one of the most renowned performing arts conservatories in the world, where he studied vocal performance and developed his skills as a bass singer. After completing his training at Juilliard, Platt embarked on a professional singing career and began performing with legitimate opera companies, including the Mozart Opera Company in New York, where he sang bass roles in various classical productions. He also spent time performing with the Gilbert and Sullivan Opera Company, specializing in the comic operas written by that famous British duo, which required not only strong vocal abilities, but also comedic timing and theatrical presence. According to historical playbills and records, Platt appeared in productions of operettas like HMS Pinafore and The Gondoliers, showcasing his talents in both music and performance before eventually transitioning away from opera. His first Broadway show was a Japanese opera called Mikado, which unfortunately premiered just a day or two after the attack on Pearl Harbor, causing the production to open and close on the same day due to the terrible timing. Within about a year of that failed opera venture, Platt made the decision to give up his singing career entirely and pivot to working in radio and eventually film and television acting, where his trained voice and stage presence would serve him well in dramatic and comedic roles alike. Fact 10. Don Adams chose ownership over salary. When Don Adams was negotiating his contract for Get Smart, he faced a critical financial decision that would ultimately determine his economic future for the rest of his life. And the choice he made turned out to be one of the smartest business decisions any television actor has ever made. The network presented Adams with two distinct compensation options. He could either take $12,500 per week with no ownership stake in the show whatsoever, or he could accept a significantly smaller weekly salary in exchange for a 1/3 ownership share of the entire series. At the time, $12,500 per week was an enormous amount of money for a television actor in the mid-1960s, representing financial security and immediate wealth that would have been hard for most performers to turn down. However, Adams decided to take the risk and chose the smaller salary combined with the 33% ownership stake, betting on the show's potential for long-term success rather than grabbing the immediate big paycheck. This gamble paid off in ways that exceeded anyone's expectations, because Get Smart became a massive hit during its original run, and then continued to generate income for decades afterward through syndication deals that kept the show on television screens around the world. Adams himself later stated that he never regretted this decision for a single moment, especially as the syndication checks kept arriving year after year, providing him with a steady and substantial income stream even during periods when he struggled with being typecast as Maxwell Smart and had difficulty finding other acting work. The show's enduring popularity in reruns meant that Adams continued to profit from his ownership stake long after the series ended in 1970. Fact 11. Agent 13 was stuck in a washing machine at 6'2". One of Get Smart's most memorable recurring gags involved Agent 13, a control operative who was always stationed in absurdly small and uncomfortable hiding places like mailboxes, fire hydrants, vending machines, and airport lockers. But what made this running joke even more ridiculous was the physical reality of the actor who played him. David Ketchum, who brought Agent 13 to life throughout the series, stood at 6 feet 2 inches tall, which meant that squeezing his large frame into these impossibly cramped spaces was not just comedically challenging, but genuinely uncomfortable and sometimes even painful for the performer. The writers seemed to take particular delight in finding increasingly ridiculous locations for Agent 13 to hide. And Ketchum later admitted in interviews that the absolute worst assignment he ever received was when the script called for him to be concealed inside a washing machine for a scene. This wasn't just a matter of climbing into the appliance and staying still, because the production team actually built a special 8-foot tube that Ketchum had to crawl into, and then they proceeded to spin him around inside it, while water and soap were sprayed in his face to create the authentic effect of being inside a functioning washing machine. Ketchum recalled that trying to remember his lines while being physically rotated and doused with soapy water was one of the most difficult acting challenges he ever faced. And he emphasized that fitting a 6'2" man into spaces designed for much smaller objects was about as cramped as you could possibly get. Despite the physical discomfort, Ketchum's portrayal of the perpetually annoyed and resentful Agent 13 became a fan-favorite element of the show. Fact 12. Jaime the Robot appeared in only 6 episodes. Jaime the Robot stands out as one of the most beloved and memorable characters in Get Smart history, yet fans might be shocked to learn that actor Dick Gautier only appeared in the role a total of 6 times across 4 seasons of the show's entire run. Jaime was introduced as a humanoid robot, originally built by the evil organization KAOS. But Maxwell Smart managed to turn him to the side of control during his very first mission, and the character became an instant hit with audiences due to his unique comedic premise. The core joke behind Jaime was that despite having a supercomputer for a brain and possessing incredible strength along with bulletproof capabilities, he would take every instruction completely literally, leading to endless misunderstandings and hilarious situations. For example, when Maxwell Smart would tell Jaime to kill the lights, the robot would pull out his handgun and shoot the light switch, prompting Max to constantly explain, "It's just an expression, Jaime," throughout their interactions. Despite appearing in such a limited number of episodes spread out over the series, Jaime made such a strong impression that many viewers who grew up watching Get Smart in syndication assumed he was a regular cast member rather than an occasional guest character. Gautier's deadpan delivery and robotic mannerisms were so effective that the character became synonymous with the show itself, and Jaime even had the honor of being chosen as Maxwell Smart's best man when Max married Agent 99, although the robot ultimately had to be sent out of the country on a special mission and missed the actual wedding ceremony, with Admiral Hargrade taking his place at the last minute. Fact 13. Get Smart inspired. Inspector Gadget. Get Smart's influence on television comedy extended far beyond its original run, and one of the most direct examples of this legacy came in 1983 when the animated series Inspector Gadget premiered, with Get Smart serving as its principal inspiration. The creators of Inspector Gadget openly acknowledged that they based their bumbling cyborg detective on the character of Maxwell Smart, creating a protagonist who was similarly incompetent, accident-prone, and completely reliant on others to save him despite somehow always managing to solve the case in the end. What made this connection even more perfect was the casting decision to have Don Adams himself provide the voice for Inspector Gadget, meaning that the actor who created Maxwell Smart's distinctive vocal delivery got to essentially play a cartoon version of the same character he had made famous 2 decades earlier. Adams brought all of his signature vocal mannerisms to Inspector Gadget, including the same clipped nasal tone and comic timing that had defined Maxwell Smart, and he even incorporated some of the catchphrases he had made popular on Get Smart into his performance as the animated detective. The parallels between the two characters were impossible to miss, as both were secret. Agents who stumbled through their missions while being aided by far more competent partners both had access to an arsenal of gadgets that frequently malfunctioned or were used incorrectly, and both somehow managed to defeat the villains despite their obvious incompetence. Adams later stated that his inspiration for the Inspector Gadget character came directly from Maxwell Smart, and the show became such a success that it introduced an entirely new generation of children to the bumbling secret agent archetype that Get Smart had pioneered. Fact 14. Bernie Kopel's German accent came from his psychiatrist. Bernie Kopel's portrayal of Siegfried, Maxwell Smart's nemesis and the vice president of public relations and terror at KAOS, became one of the most memorable villain performances in television comedy history, and the distinctive German accent that defined the character had a surprisingly personal origin story. When Kopel was first offered the role of Siegfried, his agent called to ask if he could perform a convincing German accent, which presented an interesting challenge since Kopel had never played a German character before and didn't have such an accent prepared in his repertoire. According to Kopel's own admission in later interviews, he initially attempted a Viennese accent during his audition, but quickly realized that it was far too soft and gentle for the menacing chaos villain he was supposed to portray. So he needed to find a different approach that would be more intimidating and fitting for a spy show antagonist. The solution came from an unexpected source in his personal life, as Kopel was seeing an Austrian psychiatrist at the time for therapy sessions, and he decided to base Siegfried's accent directly on the way his own doctor spoke during their appointments. This meant that every time Kopel delivered Siegfried's threatening lines or barked orders at his bumbling assistant Starker, he was essentially doing an impression of the mental health professional who was helping him work through his own psychological issues. The accent became so iconic that fans still associate it with the character decades later, and Kopel frequently appeared at Get Smart reunions where he would be asked to sign autographs with Siegfried's famous catchphrase, "We don't shush here at KAOS, Starker," written in his distinctively accented character voice. Fact 15. The opening doors were different every season. The opening title sequence of Get Smart, which showed Maxwell Smart walking through an endless series of automatically closing doors to reach control headquarters, became one of the most iconic and recognizable credit sequences in television history. But what many fans don't realize is that the sequence actually changed significantly from season to season. while the journey through the multiple doors once Maxwell Smart entered the building remained identical throughout the entire 5-season run. The first 20 seconds of each season's opening were completely different, featuring various cars and building exteriors that reflected changes in the show's sponsorships and network affiliations. In the black and white pilot episode, Smart drove a 1961 Ferrari 250 GT-PF Spider Cabriolet before entering the building, but this expensive Italian sports car only appeared that one time. For seasons 1 and 2, the opening featured a Sunbeam Tiger, which was used because that manufacturer had become associated with the show. When Volkswagen signed on as a sponsor for seasons 3 and 4, Smart was shown driving a light blue Volkswagen Karmann Kia, although interestingly, this particular car was never actually used in any episode's plot, only in the opening credits. Finally, in Season 5, when Buick became the new sponsor, the Karmann Ghia was replaced with a gold 1969 Opel GT, which did appear in the actual episodes themselves, unlike some of the previous vehicles. These changes meant that dedicated viewers who watched the show during its original broadcast would have seen Maxwell Smart arrive at control headquarters in 4 different cars over the years, even though his walk through those famous doors remained exactly the same every single time.